Thanks so much, Marnie. And I've really appreciated how each speaker has got up and shown their respects to the traditional owners. I'd like to add my voice and pay my respects to the traditional owners past, present and emerging. So the sunset shift, it's certainly intimidating for a mere mortal, a marketer amongst superheroes and gigabrains, but I'm absolutely thrilled to be standing on this stage and have the chance to share how our startup is helping protect Australia's biodiversity 1 square metre at a time. How's that audio? Tinny or good? Good, thrilled. Okay, to start us off now, for those who like to know how the story will go before they open the book, here's a little look at what we're going to cover in the next 10 minutes. I'm going to tell you what we're doing, how we do it, who it's for, and that's a little owl gag for those still paying attention, and then share a little story about a recent activation we did with Lendlease. So on a day-to-day basis, we're speaking to a variety of rooms ranging from C-suite to sustainability officers in large corporates through to mum, dad and kids wondering what their future will hold. And depending where they sit on that spectrum and depending on their knowledge, these 4 stats will hit differently. The first gets their attention, the second hits their heart, the third gets them sweating when they start realising biodiversity loss is bad for business, and by the time we get to the fourth, the 60% is probably grown a little bit when it comes to people who are worried. But the common language we find is when we speak about this 30% goal, and what we believe is that organisations and individuals are going to follow governments in embracing this UN biodiversity framework, as well as obviously the TNFDs. But for those looking to start today, it's just not that easy. And so what we're finding is this overwhelming anxiety where people say, well, where do we start? And so our goal is to make biodiversity protection simple and accessible for all. So back to the start, how do we do that? So here's what we've created. We've created a biodiversity unit that promises permanent protection of a 1 square metre plot of land and enables individuals to start today. We often present it like this. Imagine if you could pick a square metre of vulnerable Australian land and engage a leading conservation organisation to help you protect it today. Wilderlands makes that possible. We've created these units and geotagged them to enable you to zoom in and see the exact location of the plot of land you're protecting and watch as nature flourishes thanks to your support through your very own profile page. And now we get on to the how. So what we've done is we've leveraged existing conservation covenant programs in various states and created a methodology around this unit that involves permanent protection, 20 years of management, a 20% loss buffer, similar to the carbon market, and we've detailed this in a Wilderlands white paper that I'd encourage you all to download, and it was written by our chief ecologist, so a far more knowledgeable person in this space than me, and it's definitely a gigabrain dream. The next one, we find partners who are looking to actually embrace this methodology and have the capabilities, and right now we're working with Cassinia as one example, but over time we're looking to turn this platform into a marketplace and bring on other providers, and we're already seeing a growing demand from suppliers looking to explore how they could bring their projects onto this platform. We then unitise the impact of this work down to 1 square metre plots of land that are geotagged and certified and independently registered. And as you can see, they're retailing at a rate that makes them accessible for individuals as well as large organisations. And then importantly, the distribution. So we bring this to market through a range of channels. We've got wilderlands.co, which is our B2C platform, but also enable international distributors to distribute this via API through their platform and have a range of strategic partnerships we're exploring. I briefly touched on conservation partner, and as mentioned, Paul Detman's here, CEO of Cassinia, and I saw earlier mention of Bushbank. They've been selected as the primary partner for Bushbank. I know they've also got a very strong and long existing relationship with a range of organisations here, including Trust for Nature. But importantly for Wilderlands, what Cassinia has enabled us to do is bring 4 projects onto the platform to begin with. 2 in Victoria, 1 in New South Wales and 1 in South Australia that we're particularly proud of, which speaks to our traditional owner engagement, and this was recently featured on, at his time, Prince Charles, now King Charles, there's a name drop for you, on his Sustainable Markets Initiative platform. But now I'm going to speak to the who, back to that terrible gag up front. So we're B2C, B2B, but we're also B2B2C. So what does that mean? It means we're enabling organisations to do good, be seen to be doing good, and bring others on their journey. So this is an example of the collaboration we did with Lendlease recently. So when we met with Lendlease, they were planning their sustainability summit, and we looked to understand what their needs were. And they said they wanted cutting-edge conversations, they wanted an activation, they wanted to embed impact into their conference, they had a digital platform that they wanted to service with content, and as many large organisations do, they wanted exposure and positioning. And then we reverse pitched to them. We said, well, where's biodiversity in the conversation? And I'm not going to put them in the mud, but it probably wasn't at the top of their list. So we said, well, why don't we actually bring biodiversity into the conversation and get some of the best minds in the country into this space. They included Jane Hutchison from Pollination, Paul and others as part of a panel. They loved the idea. We said, well, if you're going to talk about biodiversity, how are you going to turn talk into action? And the first thing we said was, what would it look like if you actually protected the equivalent square metres of the event space you meet on and actually protected that across projects across Australia? And they loved this idea. We then said, well, why don't we take it one step further? What would it be like if every person who attended this event, rather than walking away with a tote bag, could walk away with 10 square metres of protection and actually share this journey with you? And now I'm going to play a video that shows how this rolled out and how they engaged people. So turn your attention to the screens if you would.
One week, 400 leaders coming together to tackle the biggest challenges we're facing right now. But when we leave this place, how can we make sure we turn these ideas into action? It can start with as little as just one step, or 1 square metre at a time. So here's an idea. What if we protected a patch of vulnerable Australian habitat that matched the footprint of the space we meet on today? We've teamed up with Wilderlands to make this happen. As part of the summit, Lendlease are protecting 5,800 square metres across 4 projects that are focused on permanently preserving our most precious biodiversity. And the best part, to say thanks, we're gifting you a Wilderlands starter pack, so you can join us and start protecting nature today. You'll receive your very own profile showing the impact you're making and receive regular reports on the projects you're supporting. So join us.
And so that gives you a sense of what was presented to the group. And then what we were able to do is enable Lendlease to profile what they were doing, to speak to the impact that they'd enabled, but then importantly, able to start to tell other stories to the people in the room. So this is a bit of a favourite of mine. We created this idea of what would it look like to do the Birds of Wilderlands, and we took the most upbeat, hype video we could find from a music concert, stripped out the rock stars and actually replaced all the images of rock stars with birds and went, what would it look like if all of a sudden the species were the stars? We then took it one step further and we worked with a company called Foria, who were recently featured. Facebook had basically employed Foria as their new AR provider, and we basically turned this entire space into an augmented reality experience. So as people walked around the room, they could hold their phone, they had birds flying around their head, they had galleries along the wall, they had content, and all of a sudden nature came into the space and enabled a more a conversation that was accessible. People didn't need to have a background in biodiversity loss or conservation or any of these areas. They could just start to get a sense of what does 1 square metre look like? What is this species? Why is this under threat? And I think this is part of the key of breaking down this barrier, and we're exploring this again with other solutions. This is another example we're working with Foria on, where we're looking to turn a hoarding into an interactive space. So I'm hugely grateful for the chance to be here. My background has never been in conservation. I never thought I'd be standing at a finance conference, but I know how important this is. And I think I'm looking forward to chatting to people after this, because when we have a bit of an internal mantra and people say, well, how are you going to make change? And we say 1 square metre, 1 conversation, 1 person at a time. And I think, the chance to speak somewhere like today is really important to that. So thank you.